He was probably the most notorious serial killer of the 1950s, and he was just a teenager. In the winter of 1958, 19-year-old Charles Starkweather left a trail of death and terror as he embarked on a killing spree that spanned Nebraska and Wyoming, claiming the lives of 11 individuals in a brutal manner. Accompanying him on this gruesome journey was his 14-year-old girlfriend and alleged accomplice, Caril Ann Fugate, whose family tragically fell victim to Starkweather's violence before they set out on their crime spree. But what led this seemingly ordinary teenager to transform into a monstrous murderer? Charles Starkweather came into the world on November 24, 1938, in Lincoln, Nebraska. While his family lived a solidly middle-class life, his father, a carpenter, faced intermittent unemployment due to his debilitating rheumatoid arthritis. During these challenging times, Starkweather's mother worked as a waitress to support the family. However, Starkweather's school years were far from pleasant. He endured relentless bullying due to a slight bow-legged condition and a stutter. The unrelenting taunts and torment he suffered pushed him to the brink. As he grew older and stronger, he sought an outlet for his growing rage, eventually finding it in the physical release of gym class. As a teenager, Starkweather had become a volatile and explosive individual, waiting for a catalyst to ignite his inner turmoil. Starkweather's life took a significant turn when he decided to drop out of high school and seek employment at a newspaper warehouse to cover his expenses. It was during this job that he crossed paths with Caril Ann Fugate. In 1956, at the age of 18, Starkweather met Fugate. Their introduction came through Starkweather's ex-partner, who happened to be Fugate's older sister. Starkweather's involvement with Fugate could be viewed as predatory, given that the age of consent in Nebraska, legally speaking, any physical relationship between the two, regardless of consent, would constitute statutory rape. Despite the legal complications, Starkweather and Fugate swiftly developed a close bond. Starkweather even took on the role of teaching Fugate how to drive, using his father's car for lessons. An accident during one of her driving sessions resulted in a violent altercation between Starkweather and his family, culminating in him being banished from the family home. He then secured a job as a garbage collector, all the while using this opportunity to plan robberies on targeted homes. However, his descent into serious criminal activities began when he committed his first murder the following year. On November 30th, 1957, Starkweather attempted to buy a stuffed animal from a local gas station on credit. When the young attendant declined, Starkweather resorted to armed robbery, ultimately leading the victim into the woods where he was fatally shot in the head. But it was the subsequent murder that marked a grisly turning point, setting off a chain of events that ultimately sealed Starkweather's fate in the electric chair. On January 21, 1958, Starkweather paid a visit to Fugate at her residence, where he encountered Fugate's mother and stepfather. After being confronted about his involvement with their daughter, Starkweather responded with extreme violence, fatally shooting both of them. He then proceeded to strangle and stab Fugate's 2-year-old half-sister to death. The extent of Fugate's involvement in these gruesome murders remains a subject of ongoing debate. She has consistently maintained, both then and now, that she was not a willing participant, but rather held as a hostage by Starkweather. However, Starkweather has consistently asserted a different account. Regardless of her level of participation in the murders of her own family, be it voluntary or under duress, it is undeniable that Fugate was present throughout Starkweather's subsequent killing spree, which unfolded during the month of January 1958. Following the murders of Fugate's family, the two sought refuge in her house for several days. They displayed a sign on the front window, falsely claiming that the household was afflicted with the flu to deter visitors and any suspicion. When Starkweather believed they had eluded detection, he took Fugate to the residence of her family friend, 70-year-old August Meyer. There, he callously shot both Meyer and his dog using a shotgun. Subsequently, Starkweather attempted to leave the area with Fugate, but their car became stuck in the mud. Their predicament led to an unexpected encounter with two teenagers, Robert Jensen and Caril King, who stopped to provide assistance. In a horrific display of ingratitude, Starkweather shot Jensen to death as a macabre reward for their kindness. He then tried, unsuccessfully, to sexually assault King before ultimately killing her as well. Starkweather later claimed that Fugate was responsible for King's murder, an accusation that Fugate vehemently denied. Their murderous spree continued with an intrusion into the home of industrialist C. Lauer Ward. Starkweather stabbed the maid Lillian Fenkel to death and brutally killed the family dog. Upon Clara Ward's return home, Starkweather proceeded to stab her to death. He concluded his rampage by fatally shooting C. Lauer Ward, robbing their residence, and conducting a hasty search for a new getaway vehicle. During this search, they encountered Merle Collison, who was asleep in his Buick just outside Douglas, Wyoming. In their quest to acquire his car, the pair mercilessly shot and killed Collison. Starkweather alleged that it was Fugate who pulled the trigger, a claim she staunchly refuted, asserting her innocence in Collison's death, as well as in all the other murders. Collison's Buick featured an unfamiliar brake mechanism to Starkweather. Consequently, the car stalled when he attempted to drive away. A passing motorist named Joe Sprinkle noticed the predicament and stopped to offer assistance. However, this act of goodwill escalated into a confrontation. Starkweather, brandishing a firearm, threatened Sprinkle. Their altercation caught the attention of Natrona County Sheriff's Deputy William Romer. Upon the deputy's arrival, Fugate immediately sought refuge with him and identified Starkweather as the perpetrator of the murders. Starkweather, engaged in a harrowing high-speed chase with the pursuing deputies, eventually pulled over. His decision came in response to a gunshot from one of the officers, which shattered the car's windshield and injured his ear. Starkweather was subsequently apprehended and faced charges related to only one count of first-degree murder, specifically for the killing of Robert Jensen. During this period, Starkweather willingly consented to extradition from Wyoming to Nebraska. His decision was based on the erroneous belief that prosecutors would refrain from seeking the death penalty due to the opposition to executions held by the governor at that time. However, the governor reversed his stance, making a specific exception for Charles Starkweather. During his trial, Starkweather altered his testimony multiple times. Initially, he claimed that Fugate wasn't present at the scenes, only to later assert that she willingly participated. At one point, his legal team even argued his legal insanity. Nevertheless, the jury rejected all of these claims, leading to his conviction for murder and a subsequent death sentence. Before his execution, Starkweather expressed that Fugate should face the same fate. On June 25, 1959, the state of Nebraska carried out his execution, employing the electric chair as the means. He was laid to rest in Wyuka Cemetery in Lincoln, Nebraska, where 5 of his victims were also interred. Caril Ann Fugate's story took a different turn. Throughout her trial, she maintained that she had been Starkweather's hostage, asserting that he had threatened her family's lives if she didn't comply with him, unaware that he had already killed her parents. She explained that she was too terrified to escape while he drove her around during his killing spree. The judge, however, ruled that she had sufficient opportunities to flee and subsequently sentenced her to life in prison on November 21, 1958. At that time, she became the youngest individual in American history to be tried for first-degree murder. After serving 18 years, Fugate was paroled for good behavior. She later married and adopted the name Caril Ann Clare. In February 2020, Clare pursued a pardon from the Nebraska Pardons Board, but her request was denied.